Okay, well, we've made it to week 5 of fasting from bodily desires. This week, our bottom line is that subduing the stomach is essential for finding true satisfaction.
And by the way, thank you for the icebreaker on this week's discussion sheet, Neil. It's kind of like a cruel joke.
It is
in
a cruel
way.
joke.
You're talking about subduing the stomach. We're engaged in this corporate fasting leading up to Easter, and you're getting our minds spinning on candy bars.
Yeah, it's like taunting. It's checking. It's a checking. Like, how are we doing on overcoming the flesh here? If we have a little temptation, will we
And I would
subdue?
just say, give me a break. Because that's my clue about my favorite candy bar, too.
Break me off a piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah, little Kit Kat.
Well, yeah, I
it's
would
not
have to.
subduing the stomach, but
I guess I'm more of a Snickers guy, but I prefer the Snickers almond a little bit. I don't know what that says about my personality.
it's a little pretentious.
Is
maybe.
it? Is
Maybe
it
a little because you had to add the almond
it's like I'm
piece.
too good for a regular Snickers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But then if we branch out a little bit, I'm a big fan of Snickers ice cream bars.
Now, see, you had shared that with me at one point. I'm like, I didn't know we could go into the ice cream genre.
Well.
So I could join you there. There was a summer in our house where we kept those stocked in our freezer as like our summer go-to dessert. So I'm with you on that.
Well, candy bars and things, maybe it's not candy bars for you, but things like that, those sweet things in particular seem to be one of those things for many of us that are hard to say no to. And it's one of the places where we can recognize, if we're honest with ourselves, like maybe my stomach has a little too much authority over me, like is a little too much. I'm not sure if I'm mastering my stomach or if my stomach is mastering me, because it's really hard to say no to some things. For me, it's like fresh baked cookies and things like that, that it's like almost impossible for me to say no. So.
I mean, I've already shared on here about Carpe Donut Fridays in my house. Like, that to me is the moderation of donut, because I could do Carpe Donut Monday, Carpe Donut Tuesday, Carpe Donut. But see, we've narrowed it down to Carpe Donut Friday. So one of these days I'll wear my Carpe Donut shirt.
You should.
On one of these. I've got a shirt for Carpe Donut Friday.
Yeah, well, we've got one more fasting video, but...
So we're this is kind of an interesting direction to turn this conversation that we've been in, because we kind of have been specifically saying, like, fasting is utilized culturally in different ways. Like, some people have used it for political purposes, almost like a hunger strike. And we've said this fasting that we're talking about is different than that.
Right.
Also, it seems like this fasting for nutritional reasons or dietary purposes, fitness, that kind of thing, like, has become increasingly popular with intermittent fasting and just different plans like that.
Even for medical reasons, there's doctors that are treating diabetes with it now and things like that, or obesity clinics that are recommending it, and so it really has gained in popularity in our culture, just not maybe from a spiritual standpoint.
Sure. So, and we've been saying that, the fasting that we're called into with this practice is for spiritual purposes, but today it's as though we're connecting the dot a little bit to a physical component of that. Yes. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, we would say as Christians that when we have a behavioral issue that we're trying to address, like eating can be a behavioral issue for us, right? Like we don't eat enough, or we eat too much, or we eat too much of something that's unhealthy for us. That our world would approach that in a let's address the behavior, let's modify that behavior, let's tweak this and try to get the behavior to change. So we have diets, right? And different fads come up at different times, like try this diet, try that diet, and we're going to try and fix our health just directly that way, Scripture and the way of Jesus would say, like, those outward manifestations of behavior that maybe aren't that healthy for us have a root that is spiritual also, like that we are not just physical beings, we're not just biology, we're also spirit, and all that's linked together. And so if we don't ever address the spiritual issue that's at play in our overeating maybe, or our unhealthy habits, then we're not really getting to the heart of the issue, So that's where disciplines like fasting can really help us by making our spirit healthier and
kind of dealing with that root. that's almost starting from the inside out, but it does work its way out. That there is a scriptural reality that our bodies do matter and are not to just be disregarded either.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of this proverb that we read?
It's interesting, isn't it? You find these words of augur. Would that be your pronunciation of it?
Maybe agur? I don't know. I don't know. Just what
Again, a little
ethnicity
pretentious there. Augur. You know.
Agar?
Let me get you your Snickers with almonds, Neil. You know.
Well, he's got to sound wise.
That is true.
You don't want to get your wisdom from Agar.
Right, no, okay. Well, I don't know. Simple wisdom. It's a good thing. So we have these words, and as we read the Proverbs, who are actually different proverbs are written by different people. This one we know is written by this gentleman whose origins are a little bit mysterious to us. But the words, nevertheless, are part of the canon of wisdom. And so it's interesting, the language in the text is kind of this prayer embedded in it almost of, don't make me too poor, Lord, because there's a danger that comes with that. Don't make me too wealthy or have too much, because there's a danger that comes with that. I'm wondering if you picked up on some language in this proverb that is echoed in the Lord's Prayer. Did anyone pick up on that? This idea of our daily bread.
Yeah, just give us enough for today.
And so a lot of scholars actually would suggest that Jesus, in placing that language in his model prayer for us, was referencing this piece
alluding
of wisdom.
To this.
Kind of that connection of, Lord, give me what I need for today. Give me what I need to be sustained. But again, kind of this, help me live in the middle, a healthy middle here.
Yeah, that there's, I think we could say that our culture, like America in general, lives on the richer end globally and historically of that spectrum. And so that's one of the things that's always caught my eye when I come across that passage is like, oh, I can see this playing out in my life, in my neighbors' lives, and in our communities, this lack of need for God, and almost a denying, like, who's God? Like, we've got everything we need.
Right.
Right.
Which is the perceived danger or caution, right, of affluence, of abundance. Now, in going to a developing country, like Ethiopia, and seeing third world poverty, that is evil. There's an evil reality to that level of poverty, and we would not say that is God's will either. And so there's kind of this finding that middle ground, so to speak.
Yeah, and we'll even be talking about poverty next week, and because that has a connection here too.
Absolutely.
And so we'll continue with this proverb and kind of explore that connection. But this week we're really just trying to dive into being honest with ourselves, and maybe you can even be honest with your group, because this is something that almost all of us struggle with. So there's no sense in hiding from it. Like, this is something that's a challenge. It's a challenge to, even for those of us that look the healthiest, are the healthiest, they also struggle with saying no to their stomach sometimes, or to their flesh in some way, So this is something we can all relate to, I think, and be real with each other about, like, we've got room to grow in this.
Right.
And
so you kind of move us toward a prayer, through the fasting experience. We've kind of talked about breath prayers and how we can turn a hunger pang, kind of allow that to trigger us to turn that into a prayer that's seeking God as our God and not something else, a desire of our flesh. So in this context, you kind of give us an idea around that.
Right. Yeah. Just this echoing a prayer that goes something like, God, my stomach is not my God, not my master, not in charge, doesn't have authority in my life. You are my God. So you are the one with the authority. You're the one that's the master, and just resetting our minds, as we feel those hunger pangs, and our body and our stomach is saying you need to eat, and we're used to jumping when our stomach says jump. Like that's the reality that most of us live in, and so it's very unusual then to say no. Say no, not today, not right now. And it I think does something in us spiritually, maybe even subtle. That our body is getting used to taking orders from our spirit and our will. Like, I've chosen to set this time aside for the Lord, and just taking authority over your body that way can be a really healthy thing, when a lot of times we don't.
Right. So we know this can be a sensitive subject, and a lot of times we can carry a lot of shame even with body image issues, or where we feel like we're gluttonous or overeating, or even have walked through or are walking through an eating disorder, kind of on another spectrum of this. And so be gentle and be patient with one another.
And with yourself.
And this is not a teaching to heap on shame, but again to say, is there a way, a pathway that has been modeled for us or offered scripturally that might lead to freedom? Remember, fasting, anytime we're talking about this, the objective is freedom.
Yeah. So there's something really beautiful on the other side of practicing disciplines of disengagement, and it's important to keep that in mind. It's easy to talk about these things as negative things because the initial experience doesn't feel good, but freedom feels really good.